the the classic webinar bingo. I forgot to unmute, but hopefully you can hear me okay.
We can hear you.
Yeah, and you can see slides?
We can see slides.
So that might be the top row of your bingo card sorted. Thank you, Vicky and Joe, for inviting us to talk about what's coming up, what's been happening with Alt. As Joe mentioned at the start, this is extraordinary times, but it's really been wonderful to see how the community has come together and support each other in a time of crisis, and having groups like Alt Scotland, I think it provides that kind of emotional support as well as technical know-how and getting things done. So I just wanted to share a couple of things that have been going on that within Alt, within our community, that you might not have come across, seen. This is part of the strategic update for members for June. So we'll share the link to these slides, and there's quite a few different resources in here for you to just take a quick note of, possibly for the future. So this, Maren Deepwell, our CEO, she's a big fan of Alt Scotland. I probably shouldn't have said that on a recording. She's got no favourites, but she does really like coming up to Scotland for the Alt Scotland events. So she's sorry that she couldn't be part of the meeting this morning, but hopefully we can share her voice with you all. So, and that's an aspect of what we're trying to do here, is it's making your voice heard. So where we have opportunities to inform policy and practice, we want to make sure, particularly at this time when so many decisions are being taken about how we do blended online delivery, it's not the ideal situation, and I think a fear for a lot of us is that a lot of decisions are being made now is kind of sticky plaster, but we know just throwing things online isn't the solution. So we're just trying to raise that voice, just as I imagine all you are, in terms of we're doing this under duress quite often. So in terms of the voice that we're sharing, so there's a couple of things just to highlight. So there's information literacy for education. So there's a current call for expressions of interest. This is an opportunity, particularly for the school education sector, for contributions from members. We're also part of a new initiative with JISC and Advance HE, UK and Emerge Education on learning and teaching reimagined. So this is quite high level policy work. So you can, we'll share the link through to this and you can see some of the work that we're doing as part of that. It's really been quite interesting that a number of other organizations have started approaching Alt at this time, just looking for partnerships, and because we have kind of the knowledge and capacity to do things like online conferences, and it's quite interesting the number of people coming forward to us. Also in terms of international students, we're looking for input from members on a UUK project. So again, I'll send a link from it. And also Alt responds to FemEd Tech, which is a community I'm sure many of you are familiar with, that are trying to provide better equality within EdTech. So one of their concerns was under pandemic situations that this would lead to a bias in terms of who was able to submit research so and have research published. So alt have responded to our journal that's open access. I'm glad to say that we're still publishing lots of content out the journal. I know quite a few faces here have submitted stuff and had stuff published recently. So if you haven't visited the journal recently, it's well worth a revisit. And we're also seeing a huge jobs and recruitment drive. A number of institutions are seeking to fill capacity in terms of getting talent in place. And just a reminder that if you are looking for vacancies within your own institution, you can submit details to our weekly digest. So this goes out to all our members and also our contacts list. So it's, I think, close to 4,000 people now have access to the weekly news digest. So any second now, another digest, I think, is going to be winging its way around. So it's really interesting to see the number of the increase in vacancies that we've had posted on that list. So I think last week we had 16 new vacancies posted, where usually it's around 3 or 4. So I think as well it's useful intelligence to, if you're trying to work out what other institutions are doing, you can see what vacancies they're posting to kind of work out where they might be moving in terms of their own delivery come the next couple of months. And also just a reminder as well, I know under increased pressures to get things done, your own professional development might be the last thing that you want to do, but CMALT is there as an opportunity to record your evidence. So if you are doing interesting things, just try and remember to keep a note of those. Also, that CMALT has now been expanded, so we've had CMALT for a number of years, but in the last year or so, we've expanded out to senior CMALT and associate CMALT. So these new pathways are designed for those that have either, for in the case of senior, been in leadership management roles and looking for additional accreditation and recognition of what they've done, and the associate CMALT for those that are coming in relatively new. They don't have that same level of experience that would be required for CMALT. So these are opportunities for people to get what they're doing right now recognized, and also may assist if they are seeking new job opportunities elsewhere. We also have, as part of the pandemic, we've published a consultants directory. So this is for alt members who are working as consultants. So you can go to the alt website and you can get yourself, basically you can nominate yourself to be listed. So this is an opportunity just to showcase that you're available. That we also see in the digest a number of people as well as jobs looking for input consultant requests. So again, that's another source of information. And we have a summer summit. So the annual conference was scheduled for September after the glories of Edinburgh. Last year we were set to go to London for the very first time. Unfortunately, that has had to change. So we're doing an online summer summit. So this will be towards the end of August. So it'll be a 2-day online conference. So there is a small registration fee to participate in that. There are discounts for members. So a reminder as well, if your organization is a member of alt, you can join alt for free as an associate member, so you can get those discounts. And we'll also be publishing all the resources from the conference after the event. So if you, for any reason, can't attend the conference, or you don't have access to pay a small conference fee, we will be distributing the resources from those. We've got a number of really interesting talks lined up. So one of the ones I'm particularly interested in is Charlotte Webb, who's part of the feminist internet. So she's talking about gender biases in chatbots and AI. So I think that's a really interesting talk, and kind of follows on from the last Alt Scotland event where we had Bolton College showing off some of the work that they're doing with chatbots. So you can go to the Summer Summit website and you can find out some of the other speakers we've got lined up. As I mentioned, we've got the journal, and there's some really interesting recent publications. So holographic teaching and presence. So there's been a lot of work at, I think it's Imperial. I think one of the, it's interesting to see this technology kind of making its way. It's still has a cost barrier, but I wonder if more of us will be able to make that argument to our institutions that we want to have virtual presenters, virtual classes, but also we've got the nuts and bolts stuff. So it seems that 7 Principles have been part of my life for many years. When I was at Strathclyde, the REAP project was another project based on 7 Principles. But anyway, there's lots of articles in there, and I think it's worth remembering as well that the entire journal archive is available. So if you ever need some evidence that we were actually doing this stuff a decade ago, you can search the archive and start pointing people to some of the papers there. And that is me. So hopefully that's given you a sense of what is happening around Alt right now. So hopefully Debbie's been able to share a link to the June briefing in, and I'm happy if we have time to take any questions.
Well done, Martin.
How's that for timing as well? We've got a quite long schedule.
I did put some links in there. I couldn't find the one to the slides, but we'll get them out afterwards. So.
Okay, thanks very much. That was a really great update, really comprehensive. Thanks, Martin. And thanks, Debbie, for all your work on the Flipgrids as well. What I would suggest, if anybody's got any questions, just keep them in mind, and we'll come back to them throughout the session, the opportunities to do that. Over to you, Joe.
Hi there, I've got a nice job. I'm trying to spot Kirsty. We'll get everybody's faces. I think everybody's got, oh, there she is there. Kirsty, hi, good to see you. And I thanks for your patience this morning as we were doing all that bit of sending invitations and things and dating you in. It's really just a pleasant task to introduce. Sorry we're not all in the same room, Kirsty. But really to welcome Kirsty McFall, Senior Education Officer Technologies from Education Scotland, to give us a view of what's happening across Scotland, because our learners won't see us all as siloed. They see us as all part of a learning journey. So it's important to understand what's happening in schools and colleges and universities. So Kirsty, over to you.
Great, and I'll attempt to share my screen now as well. Here we go. So hopefully that's all good. Can everybody see that? Thumbs up from somebody is always great.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Fab. Well, thank you for having me along. I think I don't think I attended last year. I think Brian from my team came along last year, but I thought it was important to come along this year. Say come along, join Zoom, to just kind of set the scene a bit in terms of where we are in schools at the moment, because it is an ever-changing scene. But just to give you some kind of ideas, and some people probably do know a bit about what we've done and what we've been doing in schools, but I thought it's worth kind of going through that again with you. So I say then, and what I mean is post the 23rd of March, which was when schools were closed. And there's been lots of things going on in Scottish education around digital for a long time, but the last 7 years have been particularly busy, changing our guidance, our curriculum guidance around digital, changing what it was called for a start off, actually, to make it a little bit more explicit. We used to call digital literacy ICT to enhance learning, which was just a little bit just a bit difficult for people to understand what we meant by that. So we've changed that. And one of the things that I've done kind of over the last 7 years is working really hard to make sure that digital has been mentioned in all of our strategy documents. So there's no excuse for and no gaps for people to be able to say, well, you know, we're focusing on this, so we're not going to focus on digital. That digital has been embedded in lots of the areas that we've been working. But in longer than that, 7 years, there's been big changes, and you'll know, because some colleges I'm sure are similar, but not quite the same tanker, as I would call the kind of schools part of education. It's really difficult to move and make those big changes, that kind of systemic change. And Joe knows that, because he's worked in the school side of things as well, and kind of knows how long and difficult it is to kind of do that. But we definitely have been progressing with those issues and areas in the last few years. In 2016, Scottish Government published the Digital Learning and Teaching Strategy, so that was a real big boost for us, a real kind of stance from Scottish Government, although no money attached to it. I think it would be different if it was being launched now, obviously. But actually has been really useful for schools and local authorities to really just be able to kind of target specific areas within that. So looking at teacher skills, confidence and capacity of staff, the curriculum, access to technology, and I think obviously that's one that's really important just now. And then the leadership side, and actually leadership's probably been the toughest one for us to pin down what it is we want to do and what we mean by that, but it's been really useful having that strategy there to back up the things that we've all been saying for some time. Some of the other things that we've been doing just is trying to make it a little bit more explicit for teachers and practitioners in schools to understand what do we mean by digital, because there is a combination there of digital literacy, digital learning and teaching, computing science, all of those things kind of coming together. It is really important and actually, but can be quite confusing because they sit different places in the curriculum. So one of the things that we did that was really successful as well were create these digital vision diagrams, as we called them, and we have a whole range of these on our digilearn.scot website, which is for digital learner, digital teacher, digital head teacher, which just slightly changes the focus. And then we also have our digital primary school or early years centre and our digital secondary, as well as digital local authority. So a whole set of those that are quite useful for people just to use as their kind of I can statements if they want to get a kind of broad overview of that. The digital schools vision that we were really lucky quite early on in the discussions around the digital learning and teaching strategy that we partnered with Microsoft, HP Enterprise, Intel, to develop a Digital Schools Award programme for Scotland, which fits really neatly with our digital learning and teaching strategy, and gives us, to be honest, a lot of the numbers that we wouldn't really be able to gather as easily. So it gives us a real good range of how schools are engaging. So at the moment we're about 50% secondary, 50% primary, which, bearing in mind this has only been going for primary coming up 3 years, coming up 4 years, then that's pretty good going actually, to have 50% of those using the framework, not 50% having achieved it, but and have been awarded, but certainly using the framework. And it very much is a self-evaluation framework, which in Scotland we're very used to engaging with, and we think that's probably why we've had so much engagement with that. And schools are still, even at this time, schools are still being validated online and still requesting to be validated, which we've found really quite interesting, that even during this process schools are wanting to keep progressing, keep moving forward with that. So really quite interesting there. What we've also had in the last 3 years is we've been focusing with our development officers on a much bigger team. So I've had 6 development officers and 2 education officers, as well as a cyber resilience and internet safety education officer, so a team of about 10 of us working specifically on this area across Scotland, which is something that we've not had before, so that's been really, really positive as well. Other thing that we've had up until now and still continue to work on now is Glow. Glow is our national internet offer, so it's access to all those tools that you can see there for all of the learners across Scotland. Not all of our local authorities use Glow. It's a low number of local authorities that don't, and that's normally because they've chosen to go Google, and they had their own tenancy already set up prior to us. We've only had Google in for the last couple of years, so G Suite's only been in for a couple of years, so some places had already decided to do that by themselves, so that they were already in there as well. But it's a kind of single digit number, and not a huge amount of local authorities that don't engage with that. Some other ones do have their own Microsoft tenancies as well, but most learners are using Glow. Where are we now? So I mean, I'm going to go back to the Glow slide, mainly because, well, what happened on the 23rd of March when schools closed, we had around about 3 million users a month, sorry, not users, 3 million individual logins a month on Glow, and those numbers have decreased. We were really proud of those numbers, saw those numbers going. On the first day, on the 23rd of March, I think we had 3 million individual accesses to Glow, so things changed really quickly that day, and now we're looking at, I think in May we had around 12,000 individual logins to Glow. Now that number is most definitely larger than that, because as you'll know, lots of people will be accessing through apps, which those numbers come from our RM Unify login authentication portal. So you actually have to log in for those numbers to register, whereas like myself and lots of you will be accessing via an app, so you're only having to do that once. So actually lots of those numbers are not held in there, so the number will be bigger than 11.5 million, which is really good to see. And I mean, as you'll know, schools embraced this a difficult time, but embraced it, and I've been using lots of different things. Yes, they've been using Glow, but they're also using things like Seesaw. Some of you, if you're parents, you'll know about these different apps, Show My Homework, all of these different ways that schools are using, particularly things like Seesaw app and Showbie for younger learners who are going to be accessing the technology and the activities that schools are sending normally with an adult. So that's normally kind of up to P3, normally P4. Normally we say most local authorities are saying P4 onwards can access Glow, but before that. So lots of engagement since then. We've been, right at the beginning, we decided that as the digital team, a couple of weeks before we saw this coming, had spoke with our colleagues. We already had the website there, the one at the top, which is the digital learning community logo in it. That site's digilearn.scot if you want to access that. It's not a closed place. And what we worked with all our curriculum colleagues in Education Scotland and created some support for practitioners, and that was around that collating and curating resources for practitioners. So not creating lots of new resources, just if you're completely new and there's anything you wanted to come and check. And we actually used Wakelets for that within the blog, just a collation of what's already out there, so that practitioners get really extremely popular really, really quickly. So that was on the 23rd of March that we actually launched that. We did that really, really quickly. I'm just going to click through on my other to actually get some stats so that I can tell you some stats on that. Live and recorded webinars. We set up webinars straight away, and some of them were really simple. They were just how do you access Glow? how do you set up a team? How really quite simple tools-based stuff to start off with, but very quickly we've developed into much more pedagogical approaches, and really noticing that actually it's the assessment part that we can really take advantage of. And again, Joel know this from his previous work, but we're really trying to show teachers how they can now take advantage of and help look at formative assessment as well as gather some summative assessment using the tools that they've got available to them as well. And my file's just open, so we've had since the 23rd we've delivered 39 webinars, had about 7,500 registrations for those, and about 4,000 attendees at those webinars. We've still got one to run this week. That's our last one before the summer holidays. But our YouTube channel as well has gone from, we didn't have a YouTube channel before that, but the recordings are going really, really well, and we've had about 15,000 views of the recordings on there, and most people kind of staying for about 10 minutes, which is what we would expect, because people are normally coming back to watch something that they needed a little bit more information, and we're going to take that information moving forward. The site, the digilearn.scot site, we've also it's developing all the time, sharing practice. We're using these guest blogs. So we actually ask practitioners to write a blog. So it's not a case study, it's not a formal case study, it's a tell us what your experience is, and they fill out a form, give us that information, and then we check it, make sure it's nothing, no major problems, and then we share it. And I think we're at about 55 posts on there just now, which is fantastic. Really, really useful to actually hear what actual practitioners are up to and what they're doing. So really quite interesting in there as well. And the blog had been launched just about a month or so before lockdown, but in that time we've had about, I think we're up to about 120,000 views of that, and 53,000 are separate sessions on there. So we know people are using it and people are interested in it as well, which is great. Education Scotland's kind of more formal stuff started quite a bit later, I'll be honest. The Education Scotland space for practitioners, that was up really quite quickly, sharing basically what was already on the digilearn.scot site, but more formally via Education Scotland, and giving them the links, so a kind of one-stop shop for them to be able to find everything in there. We also, the team also wrote a document called Learning and Teaching Online, which is a kind of mixture. What it doesn't have in there is it doesn't have the research. It can signpost, because we know lots of people were doing papers on collating the evidence of blended learning and all that type of work and online learning. So this one actually focuses specifically on what are the things that you need to consider as a teacher moving forward, and how are you going to deliver that? What are some of the practicalities around that? So it's quite a practical document, that one, in there. And then on the 11th of May, a more formal kind of output from education called Scotland Learns was published, and that is, up until this week we've delivered parent newsletters and practitioner use newsletters, which are linking to some new resources that might be of use to people, staff and parents, in there as well. And Scotland Learns will develop over the holidays depending on what scenarios are necessary for the year ahead with that. So what's next? I think that's, as you'll be aware as well, we're supporting schools to be thinking about the blended learning, and I think it's always difficult because it's Scottish blended learning we're talking about there, and we're not talking about a specific type. We're talking about what are the approaches our schools are going to be taking. At the moment, there's still a lot of unanswered questions for teachers. Lots of people still thinking about what their timetables are going to be, how often they're going to have children in school. So we're supporting that as best we can with our work around digital. But I think, as I was saying, I think one of the key things that we've seen is that this idea of the blended learning and the formative assessment, and how that can support teachers to know where children are, depending if they're not in school and what work they've set them, and really kind of, particularly in secondary school, really helping them get their heads around that again. It's probably something that's not always been fully understood in secondary schools. It's much easier to do the summative assessment for them. So there's a real opportunity to embed that. And one of the things that we are saying to them is that all this work that we're doing just now, we've got some really interesting projects up, and particularly in the technologies areas, and I'm not just biased, they're just always a little bit more comfortable with digital, so I've jumped ahead a little bit further. But some really nice projects looking at using different types of forms, whether that's Google Forms or Microsoft Forms, to do the things that they know the kids have been engaging with, so quizzes, watching short videos. They don't want to watch a long video that's not their teacher, interestingly. That seems to be the feedback we're getting from lots of people. So pulling all of that together into something that's really usable, but also it's great because it's going to be there forever. So next year, we keep saying to teachers, you've got this great opportunity where you create these resources now, but actually next year you're going to be able to still use these, and hopefully that's going to give you more time in class to have that rich experience and rich discussions that sometimes we struggle to have in senior phase, particularly because there's so much content to be delivered. So lots of conversations around that. We're going to be continuing our live webinars. As I say, they're going to be, the focus will slightly change. We're also doing in Education Scotland, we're also doing blethers. I think there's big blethers and wee blethers depending on what the topics are and how many people they want to access. They're proving really popular as well, just giving people the space to come and have a conversation and share with each other. So not actually necessarily me standing up and delivering anything or any of my colleagues doing that, actually just giving people the opportunity to have those conversations, but they seem to be engaging with that really well. Whereas previously, I think if we'd done that, that wouldn't have been something that would have been hugely successful in a kind of remote sense, using Teams or Zoom or whatever the kind of VC method is. As I said, Scotland Learns will be morphing into what it needs to be moving into the next year. So we're obviously working with teachers on what we've created just now and what that's going to be moving forward. And obviously Glow, it's an evergreen environment. Things will be changing. We've been listening, in terms of video conferencing with pupils. We've been working really closely with Google and Microsoft to try and make that as safe an environment for our teachers and for our learners as possible. So there's still lots of discussions there, but we're kind of hoping that this sustained amount of engagement is actually going to prove to be really positive for Glow and for digital more generally in schools, so that it is something that continues when we're all back to a normal, back in school buildings and our offices and things like that as well. So lots have been going on in there, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour. Quick run through, I'm looking at my time, that was not too bad. A quick run through of what we have been doing, so happy to answer any questions as well.
That was absolutely super, Kirsty. Thanks for that. I'm busy taking notes, and I'm sure you'll be happy to share that presentation. Quite a few colleagues know that was absolutely super. And then over to the assembly for some questions.
So can I ask a question, Kirsty? I think as a parent, I've got a 7-year-old at school, and I'm very aware from what I see on Twitter and online of the huge variation on how schools are engaging with parents and their learners at home. What can be done to is there a way you can standardise it so that some children are not disadvantaged by their schools, perhaps lack of engagement with all this support that's available? But I'm definitely seeing disparities between what's possible and what we're actually experiencing as parents and learners.
Yeah, I think that's the discussions that obviously the First Minister mentioned last week, that our Education Scotland will be engaging with local authorities about what their approaches are moving forward. So to have a kind of more discussion about how that's progressing. Obviously there's 32 local authorities, so there's 32 flavours. So it's always difficult to get complete consistency across there, but I think hopefully those discussions are going to help. And I know it's been a long time since the 23rd of March, but in real terms, it's not been that long to get that process organised. And I think the thing to remember is that the time we've been in just now, it is going to be a different approach we're moving into, and people have had longer to plan for that, whereas the current one was really, really quite a short term, you know, have less than a week really to get organised to think with that. So I think that people have had longer to think about that. It is going to be different from what we are in just now, because that's what we talk to teachers about. Learners are going to have some face-to-face time to actually talk about how they do their learning out of school, and so there's going to be more of that there. So I hope that helps.
No, fantastic. Thank you very much. And I'm delighted to see all the support that is available as well. That's fantastic. Thank you.
So I'll just put my wee tuppence in, and it's the bit that made me twitch about a week and a half ago, and it was the conflation of what is an emergency response in schools and education and colleges, and what the politicians said, and they talked about the end of blended learning, and I thought, no, it's just the start of blended learning. Actually, we want to keep a lot of this stuff going, and I know they know that, and they've got wonderful digital strategies and things, but if we can do anything to shape the politicians or even the journalists' messaging, because they're conflating that emergency response with blended learning, and blended learning is here to stay. And if anything, hopefully, just as you highlighted, Kirsty, we're going to get a big dividend out of all this work that we're all doing just now. Sorry, open to questions again. That was me hogging the mic.
I did see that tweet.
Hi, I was wondering if I could ask a quick question, and I agree that I think once a lot of people talk about we're never going back or changing, but I suspect that when COVID is over, or we're past that sort of critical point, that there probably is a very real chance that we will go back to where we were. And I was just wondering, are there particular parts of delivery that you've seen that you're enthused by, and there's generally a very positive reception to, that things that we could focus on going forward into the future? What are the key points of digital delivery and online delivery that offer a true benefit and enhancement to what we've had, and where we should focus our efforts?
I think, I mean, there's two bits, and I do think it is around, for me, and what I've seen is definitely around that assessment side and the formative, particularly the formative side of it there, and the things that we're seeing happening there is really good and really exciting. I think the other part is the equity side as well, and I think there's some real opportunities for children who don't attend school for whatever reason, actually having a much more normal offer, you know, so that if there's young people who can't attend, but they can still be engaging in the class and they can still be engaging in the work, that actually previously we found quite difficult to know how to do that. I think there will be some real opportunities in that, and that's what we're seeing just now. Actually, some of the conversations that we're having with teachers is it's not they're getting engagement when they get it right. They're getting engagement from kids who don't engage in the class, and I think there's a real opportunity there moving forward, definitely.
Kirsty, can I just ask, just following on from that, because I was going to ask about assessment, and I think just thinking from schools progressing, what are the kind of assessments? I know you said they're formative, but what kind of things are you seeing people that are doing there? Because I think, you know, having that sort of continuity for learners throughout the education system, the more we can get students used to doing things online. So I'm just quite curious what types of assessment you're seeing coming.
So I think just to give one example, and kind of follow on from the bit that I was saying there about using forms, what they're saying is that young people are engaging much more in the quizzes when they send a quiz out. And I think there's lots of reasons for that. I think the reason is you can do it on your phone, because most of these forms will look nice on a phone or on like a laptop, and what they're saying is they're not necessarily getting engagement if they send out oh, can you add some slides to this presentation, or you can, and they're not getting engagement in that. So what some of them have done, and we all know they love YouTube, you know, young people love YouTube. I've got a 7-year-old loves YouTube, and what they've been saying is the longer the video is, the more they want it to be their own teacher. But actually there's a real opportunity to do little snapshots of learning and the content learning at home. You know, something that might take you 20 minutes or an hour to deliver in class, because it's a class situation, you actually can you can actually watch a video that's maybe 3 minutes long or 4 minutes long that delivers the same content. So actually what they've been doing, or a specific group in about 3 different subject areas, have now started to develop. They've identified all the content they want to deliver. They've identified the videos. They're embedding those in forms. They're then having the formative 6-7 questions afterwards, which automatically marks grades for them. They can identify which areas the learners are struggling with, and then the other advantage of that is you can then put a summative bit, and I suppose this gets to the senior phase stuff for specifically after this year, but thinking about the future as well. How do we gather that more summative assessment that we want, and we don't want to be running about looking for next year if something happened and we were in the same situation with exams next year? How do we do that? So actually what you can do in all those forms now is upload. So you could actually set a summative task, which was, I think Brian in our computing science was talking about a wireframe. Go off and draw your wireframe, take a picture of it, which you do much easier from your phone, and upload. So that's the kind of interesting ways they're doing it. Whereas I think previously, certainly in senior phase, there would have been very little of that formative assessment part, whereas actually they're probably going to get a better understanding about who's understanding and who's not understanding. Does that make sense, Sheila?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. No, that's great to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to suggest, in the interest of time, that we just move on. We've got a really tight schedule. I know everybody's time is very precious at the moment. So Jo and Kenji, you're going to lead a panel discussion on what's happening in FE. And we've got input as well. We've got Robin McGregor, David Hiddleston and Julian Hopkins have also agreed to give their input. But first of all, before we move on to that, can I just suggest that everybody uses the reaction icon to give Kirsty a big clap, because that was fantastic.
Yeah, it was absolutely wonderful. Right.
Thank you. Okay.
Right. And it's over to me. Give me a second. I was going to share the right screen. I had it up. Right. So Kenji and I had a wee confab, and what we thought we would do is I'll give you a quick week through what we've been doing at City of Glasgow College. So I'm going to give you a college view, and then Kenji will chip in with some of what's happening across Scotland. So just bear with me, and I'll just share my screen now. I hope you can all see the beginning of a presentation appearing. Yeah, I can't see you all, so I hope you can all hear me and see me. And I want to go to so just a quick snapshot, and you'll get all of this. So City of Glasgow College, 30,000 learners. There's the breakdown there. About 800 teaching staff and about 800 support staff, and all cast into that emergency situation that we've all been experiencing. At the same time, behind the scenes, we were planning a restructure anyway, and what was the Centre of Professional and Technical Education became the Learning and Teaching Academy. Now we were doing that anyway, and we were doing a lot of developments there anyway, and this has accelerated a lot of the work that we were doing. So it's been quite useful from that point of view. Behind the scenes, and again, it will be common across all of further education. So any of my further education colleagues that are in the meeting will be familiar with this. That now FE staff have to work towards accreditation by the General Teaching Council for Scotland. There's professional standards there, and that includes digital. So we had that lever was emerging anyway. In City of Glasgow College, we also have the ambition to deliver taught degree award, to get taught degree awarding powers. So we're also embedding the advanced HE professional standards in what we were doing. So we were doing all of this. This screen is really telling you what we were doing. We've got a journal club. We were doing a whole lot of things around scholarly activity. We were just at the point of starting all of this when the crisis happened. And again, if you follow that link, you'll get to find out all the other things that we were doing around pedagogy, practice, reflection, and accreditation. So it was useful that we're building this resource when COVID-19 struck. What happened post-COVID? Well, again, just the techie bits in the background. MS Teams for us had just arrived. We were just planning about how we would roll it out only on the teaching side, so not students. We've got a self-hosted Moodle. We've had ClickView, which is both a repository of useful content, but it's also a place where lecturers can store their own video content. We had it for a year and we were just rolling it out. Zoom we didn't have, we've just grabbed, and we're still using the free version. Turnitin we had, Adobe Creative Cloud we had. We did a fair bit, as you'll see, with the Google Digital, without having a good digital library. If you have a look at LibGuides, which again will be familiar with people in the HE sector, maybe not so much in the college sector, we've got a good virtual library which we've improved. We do a lot with Google Sites, we do a lot with Wakelets, and for the Journal Club and various other things, we'd gone with Reclaim Hosting and a WordPress system that again will be familiar to some of my colleagues in higher education. We've done one JISC survey, so here we are. These are the kind of things that students use. I've got to move my wee bit picture of you around. We've done the two JISC surveys, or the three JISC surveys, the student one, the teaching staff one, and the support staff one. I've only got the results from the student side of things, not the staff side of things. So what do students use? Well, unsurprisingly, Google and YouTube. You can see all the things the college do, taking a bit of background, but look how Zoom is up there. They wouldn't have known what Zoom was until post-COVID, because we weren't using it for any learning and teaching. We've provided an enormous amount of support. I probably won't dwell on this slide. I'll maybe just jump to, or even this slide. You'll get all of this. It's all the things that we've done. It's all that bit about, we featured in the GTCS magazine and all these kind of things. We've done a lot of stuff with Kenji and CDN as well. We've had 3 staff up talking at the virtual bridge sessions, and just a shout out for Kenji and the virtual bridge sessions. They have been really excellent, and again, it's worth going and having a look at the legacy of sessions there. It gives you a really good picture of what's happening across Scottish FE. In terms of numbers, and this is the bit I wanted to get to quite quickly, we've been running 2 webinars a day from the moment the crisis hit. We're now up to, and the webinars tend to last an hour. They focused first of all on the technologies we needed staff to use just to connect with the learners. Then we moved through a phase of lots of stuff about assessment tools, and now we're looking at how we build content and things for the new year, for the new session in August. That's the kind of numbers we've been getting. That's the add up, and that's the kind of sessions that we've been running. And again, you'll get a copy of this, and you go back and see that. We've got great statistics on what we've been doing with webinars and interactions with Moodle on the staff and student side, and this is our engagement from the library. We've got a great digital library and collections team, and we've seen staff and students really making full use of all the support that we have in place. The kind of tools that students use to communicate with each other, and again, this is from the JISC survey. You can see Zoom, again, surprisingly, is there, because it looks as though students are using that to communicate with each other too, but the more usual suspects of WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger and things are there. We did one of these maps, which I think we're going to see a few of these this morning, about what we support inside, what you support outside, what's there that you can use, and that whole link to ABC learning design. And a lot of our workshops now are all focusing on ABC learning design, so that people stand back and think and pause and reflect on how they need to embed a learning technology in their courses. Student side, we think about 25% of our students probably weren't as engaged as they ought to have been, and we're still chasing that exact figure. And it was sort of post-Easter. We've got a waiting list for laptops. We think the digital divide might be as low as 1%. Remember, 30,000 students, so it might be as low as 1%, but it might be as high as 10%. We've still got 140 students who are on a waiting list for laptops that we don't have at the moment. But we have lent out 256 laptops and 450 machines to staff, because staff weren't used to working remotely either. And that's probably my bit. Kenji, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, so a few additional points. So the things experienced by City of Glasgow College were pretty much experienced by all. All the colleges have done exceptionally well to respond to the crisis, really. Although it has been inconsistent, perhaps even within individual colleges and between colleges, but it's undeniable that everyone's doing their best. There was a survey for the sector that was recently done to gauge how institutions have responded digitally, but the draft report's been released to the principals group and a short life working group, and that will be released later this week. Some of the things that come out of it, though, we can see that there is some concern about future digital delivery and the connectivity and access to devices that the incoming students will have. We think that roughly 3/4 of institutions are currently polling the incoming students to see what the situation would be. There is a significant worry that financially they might not be able to meet the demand for those hardware resources if a significant number of students come in without the ability to carry on blended learning at home. One of the other key drivers we find at CDN is also the the legislation around accessibility. So the public body web accessibility regulations started in 2018, and they come into full force in September 2020, which is screamingly close. So typically where we've been working with JISC to develop some guides around that, we're developing content around that, but essentially it means that all colleges and universities, when they're delivering online, and that includes closed areas like VLEs, the content that goes online has to meet a very strong standard for web accessibility, specifically WCAG 2.0 AA standard, which believe me, it's as bad as it sounds, all those letters and numbers. So as well as that pressure of getting staff more digitally capable, we have to remember that we have to address a wide audience, and that content that we deliver is applicable for everyone. So getting up to that accessible standard is another pressure. And I hope for the best for that. I think probably in the last 3 months, more has been done to advance digital delivery than for me working. It's like the last 10 years of my life is I've seen the acceleration in the last 3 months, for all the wrong reasons, but hopefully something good will come out of it. That's me, by the way.
Fantastic, that was a really nice update, Joe and Kenji. I wonder if Robin or David or Julian would like to step in and share some of their experiences.
Yeah, at Edinburgh College, it's been very much similar to Glasgow. But the three main challenges it's not so much staff engagement. I think staff have been absolutely excellent. But we're now at the stage where there needs to be a CPD framework in place for staff to move forward. So that's the first thing that we need to put together. The other area that we have found challenging is student engagement, because what everybody's got to remember, we're dealing with non-advanced students, levels 3, 4 and 5, who we have learners who are still learning to learn. So we've suddenly been put into this last 3 months of developing online learning. We need to start planning for that. And if we can start planning for that and also get the financial support, then we can actually move forward. So the digital divide is definitely going to be the big issue, especially where Edinburgh College serve the North of Edinburgh and also the West Edinburgh, which is the two areas where there is very much a digital divide problem. But what we've done at Edinburgh College is try to keep it simple. So all the students use Moodle face-to-face. So we've used that remotely, and we've maybe built on what we've delivered in the past by using some more of the tools that are in Moodle, and then moved over to Microsoft Teams. So going into next year, that's the two main tools we'll use, and hopefully we can actually add others like Kahoot to enhance the classroom delivery. Thanks.
That's super. Is Robin about? How's Northeast?
Hello, yeah, I'm here. So I think for us, we're all having the same problems. We're all having the same challenges. I think in the northeast of Scotland, we were perhaps slightly ahead of the game in terms of remote learning, just because we've had a bring your own device initiative for about 8 years now. So we knew with quite high levels of confidence that about 80% of our students were already equipped for learning online. Our staff as well, we've been running a digital futures initiative for a few years now, so we've really focused on kind of quite tightly defining what our institutional tools are, what are the ones that we support. We use Blackboard, we use Blackboard Collaborate, we use Teams, we use Question Mark, Turnitin, and these are the kind of fundamentals of our structure, I suppose, that supports our course. What we've, I suppose, realized is that the thing we really need to focus on is the pedagogy for teaching online. And that's perhaps where our staff are perhaps feeling most concerned, is just, you know, we talk about blended learning, and I think we would all acknowledge that we've definitely been in a kind of reactive phase for the last few months, and that people have kind of just lifted their existing ways of teaching and dropped it into an online world. You know, I hear about some of the private schools in and around Aberdeen that are delivering 6 hours of synchronous learning a day. You know, that's great, but I don't think that's necessarily sustainable for our students. So what we're doing now is working with our unions, working with our colleagues to try and define a work pattern or a workload that's more manageable for the year ahead. So if, you know, we currently, for those in HE, you might not be aware, but a college lecturer teaches 23 hours a week, and that's nationally agreed. Now, 23 hours teaching in a classroom is relatively achievable. That's less easy to do if people think that that means that they have to teach 23 hours of face-to-face synchronous online learning. That's not realistic. You know, some of our students are the parents of school people, some of our students are working. We can't reasonably expect our students to be engaging in a full-time curriculum. So we're trying to really, I suppose, carefully define at a local level what an appropriate workload would be for students, what would be the balance between synchronous and asynchronous learning, and how do we then train people to do that. So I'm part of the national VPs working group that was set up to try and pull together all the colleges so that we could not duplicate work, and so that we could share resources. And that's been really, really refreshing, actually. I've never worked so closely with other institutions, and I think we're obviously aware of the timescales that we're trying to work within, and I think that there is definitely demand for a joined up CPD course for teaching online, but we're realistic about how much time we have. You know, lots of colleges now finish this week, and we won't see staff again until the end of August. So we're working with CDN, with Kenji and Gina, to try and pull together resources so that we can at least go to each college and say, here, this is reliable, good quality stuff that we can use to support our staff. Sorry, I'm talking too much. So I think pedagogy is key, but I think the big thing for us as well has just been how reliable all the technology's been. You know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we would have been sunk, I think, if this had happened, because, you know, we would have had dropouts of the VLE, we would have had Wi-Fi issues, but it's, you know, I can't really think of one single problem we've had technically since we went down into lockdown. And I think that knowing that the tools are reliable and that they work gives staff a lot more confidence, and that's definitely been helpful, I suppose. The last thing is, for colleges, so as a college, we're a reasonably big college. We've got about 6,500 full-time students and about 14,000 part-time students, not the size of Glasgow, but still large. We've got over 1,000 students that we know we can't finish their course this year. They're going to have to come back after the summer to complete their courses. These are students on vocational, technical, regulated courses. And so I think what we need to do is start thinking about how we use technology better to support the achievement of this vocational, practical, work-based and highly regulated training, so that we can be a bit more resilient in the future. That's me.
Oh,
Yeah, I
good.
guess I can come in with something there. I'm Julian Hopkins, City of Glasgow College. I mean, all those points everybody was saying, I think reflect. I mean, I've experienced many of the same things. One thing I found is people learning at home, the environment at home. A lot of people, everybody had to rush home, and a lot of people got laptops, some didn't. But it's more than just having a computer. And the discussion in the chat right now, whether people have their own computer, more than one computer at home. It's also having a screen. If you're over a laptop all day with a little screen, I remember somebody I was suggesting, well, get a key. You can just get a, you can get a keyboard and a separate mouse and plug it into your laptop. It makes a big difference. And so it's about having all of those things at home as well, and then telling people helping them to arrange that for themselves. Dual monitors, for example, can make such a big difference, or even plugging your laptop and a monitor together. And I think it strikes me that over the next 6 months to a year, there's a larger problem which really affects the whole economy in many ways. With so many people working from home, is what is a fair distribution of the costs inherent in working from home? I mean, for me, heating comes up, winter comes in, you spend all the day at home, your heating cost is going to go up. It's, that kind of thing. And so I don't know how that's going to be resolved actually in terms of sector arrangements or something like that. So, and the other thing I just wanted to mention was digital literacy. I mean, I do supports. I've been doing lots of one-on-one support, and a lot of time, and sometimes you find people who really, those staff who really don't have the basic skill, even a common vocabulary. They're not even familiar with how to use their, I mean, I spent with one lecturer, I spent a good few hours just helping her to learn how to name her files, save her files, organize them in folders on her computer, and so on. And there are people there who really, although the college, it's assumed when people are employed, it's assumed they have basic office skills, Microsoft Office and so on. But in fact, they don't always have them, and there's no real way of assessing that. And until now, I think they manage because they have their own systems and everything's very much, they work it out. But now all of this is coming to the fore. And in our college, for example, it seems that the organizationally, that would be our occupational development would be responsible for training people for these kind of skills, but it actually falls to learning technology very often. And those are, and I think somebody else was mentioning about how, I mean, it's all about training up. I think Kirsty as well. Basically, you got pockets of people who really, really struggle with the most basic access to computers. And how can you, and the other thing is, how do you teach them using a computer, how to use a computer? You've got the tool in between, and I would talk with somebody and I ask them to share their screen, and then they press the wrong button, and they spend 10 minutes just trying to get back to them, be able to share their screen so I can tell them to move them mouse around on the screen. So, yeah, and there's some solutions to that. There are digital learning sources online, access to digital literacy and so on. And basically these need to be, I don't know, thought about again. And the assumption that people can actually use the most basic computer thing needs to be rethought. And then basically staff and students need to go through some kind of basic digital literacy assessments, and then they can be targeted and supported in the right ways somehow.
Thanks very much, Julian, and thanks, David, and also thanks, Robin, and Joe, and Kenji as well. Thanks a lot. If everyone would like to just briefly show their appreciation by using the reaction button, that would be fantastic. And what I suggest is, we've already covered a huge amount of information this morning, so let's have a little break for 5 minutes. Everybody go and grab some tea, coffee, cake, whatever you've got to hand, and come back in 5 minutes, and then we'll start with what's happening in HE. Okay, see you soon.
Okay.
Keith and Sheila, are you happy just to share your screen for the next part?
Yeah, absolutely. Keith, would you mind sharing? Is that okay?
Yep, no problem. I'll do that just now. Just give me 1 second.
Fantastic. Do you want us just to start again, Vicky, or do you want to?
Yeah, just when you're ready. I think people are just
getting that. I just want to say something. It's my second last day as chair of Vault. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone, to all of you, for everything that you've done over the last couple of months, because I'm not sure if people are saying thank you to you guys enough. So I'm just going to say there, and I think you should just give yourself all a wee round of applause for everything you've done. It's been an extraordinary time, and I think for me, being an independent and not working within a college, school or university, it's been really heartening to see the amount of sharing, not just resources, but practice and the things that we've been talking about this morning. That has been really, really positive to see, and I hope that continues. So I think what Keith and I are going to do is we're going to have maybe a slightly kind of more thoughtful session here. We're just going to get to think about some of maybe the bigger issues and some of the things that Joe was mentioning about what we want to keep. I have a little poster printed, well, it's a little A4 sheet printed out above my desk just now, and I saw it, I think, just before we went into lockdown. And it says, in the rush to return to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to. And I think we really do need to think about that and be giving some serious consideration. What is it that we do want to keep, and what things can we actually try and maybe not go back to? And maybe some of our obsessions and some of the, I suppose, some of the narratives around, and I'm going to use some air quotes here, about what proper education should be. I think we've got a real opportunity here to change that. But anyway, that's just to kind of set the scene. But I really just did want to say thank you to everyone for everything that you're doing. But Keith, I'll maybe hand over to you now. The slides are up, and you can take us through the first bit of this session.
Great, thank you, Sheila, and thanks, Vicky and Joe, for the chance to talk to some of this today. I think we've kind of, Sheila and I had a little discussion ahead of today's event, and started to think about maybe some of the common themes that we're hearing in the discussions we're having with colleagues, not just within the HE sector, but that's the part that we're speaking to today. So, and there's a number of things that have come up, and they'll be common across schools, colleges, and universities. Some we've touched upon already, but we kind of identified 3 key themes that we thought might frame our discussion, and we've got a few questions just to put to everyone by way of a kind of open floor. The first was around readiness. We've heard a lot about this already in terms of, you know, our learners haven't self-selected to study fully online. Our incoming students have not had the last 3 months to even begin to start getting used to some of those challenges. We also have the readiness of our staff and our university processes and procedures and things to consider. However, one of the things that we felt was really important, I alluded to this in the little video I uploaded, was around the nature of readiness. There will be some generic things that are common to all of our staff and students around what we need to be ready for. But readiness is also contextual. And within particular programs and particular disciplines and particular pedagogic approaches, there'll be different dimensions of readiness depending on those individuals and what they're seeking to do. Readiness will not be a one-size-fits-all. We also had some thoughts around time and space. Again, these have been touched upon, but around equity in relation to the spaces that our learners have to engage with learning and teaching, both digitally and from home. We also thought about obviously the need for everyone to have appropriate digital spaces, but a point that's been well made several times over the last 3 months is that equity and trying to ensure an equality and engagement will not just be about giving students laptops, but that might be a good initial first step to make sure that everyone's got a minimum baseline of technology. And we also thought place was really important, and thinking about not just the place of learning, but the place of our learners in particular within their learning communities, and how do we keep that sense of place and belonging. So we have a few open questions, but before we move on to those, I'll just invite Sheila to add anything around these themes that she wants to bring in.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So yeah, absolutely second everything Keith said, particularly around context. And I think more than ever that is really critical. And I think that relates, context then relates to everything, particularly around about equity and who's actually going to have access to further and higher education. I think that's a key discussion point just now, and I think a lot of the things that are going on just now in terms of Black Lives Matter, we need to be thinking about as well in terms of how we are developing more equitable curriculums, the kind of references and sources that we're looking to, and how we have an inclusive community. And also making sure that our education spaces are hospitable for our students and our staff, in that you come into our spaces and you feel welcome. And that can be quite challenging in a face-to-face or sense, but it can be even more challenging online. But again, I think we need to be thinking about that as well. I think one of the things in terms of time and space, I really think there needs to be, and this is that it's always so hard, the discussions about time, because everything does come back to time. I hear so many of my colleagues and many of you that are in the room this morning, you're going to an awful lot of meetings just now. And I'm not sure that's a really good use of everybody's time. I used to have a boss, and many of you who know me will have heard me say this before, and he used to say, meetings, the practical alternative to work. I think we're having so many meetings just now that we're maybe not having enough time focusing in on what we're going to do. So I think we need to think about how we're using our time. I think we need to be thinking about time and timetabling in very different ways. If we're bringing our students in, and obviously the debates just now about the 1 metre, the 2 metre, everything's kind of in flux, but it does look particularly that we're not going to have all our students back in our schools and our colleges and our universities all at the same time for quite a while. So what times are we going to have them in? What impact will that have on the staff time in terms of teaching time, of support time, of lab time? We might need to really rethink this kind of 9 to 5, but again, we have to think about equity. If you have childcare issues, if you live somewhere remote and you can't, the public transport isn't particularly reliable, or just now you might not actually want to go on to public transport. So there's lots of things I think we need to be giving ourselves more time to think about in terms of how we're changing our curriculum, how we're changing the time of when we're actually delivering things, and that we have an inclusive conversation about that. I also think in terms of the spaces that we have, particularly our city centre campuses and City of Glasgow College. I mean, those of you who were there the last couple of meetings we've had there, what an amazing, huge space that is. Same with lots of university campuses. Are there ways that we can use these digitally rich spaces to help us reconnect a bit more with our community? And maybe thinking about how we can be using our curriculum, our activities, to do some group work with not just within the college and within the university, but within the community as well. And maybe at times when our spaces aren't being used, opening them up, obviously within the physical distancing guidelines, to sectors of our communities as well. I think as well, the other thing I just want to add there, and I'm just kind of trying to get my head around this, as I'm sure a lot of you will be, is this whole notion of a bubble, of a learning bubble, and how we're actually going to do that, and will that actually work? But I think there's maybe an opportunity here for us to rethink and refocus group work, particularly in HE. But there's lots that we need to do there in terms of self-selecting bubbles. Do you want to get stuck in a bubble? How can you be in multiple bubbles? So I think there's lots of things that we need to do there. But as Keith said, it does depend on context. I think there's lots of things, but I think we really need to maybe in some of our meetings be having some serious consideration to time and context and what we're doing. And I think going back to my earlier point about our rush to get back to normal, I think now we are kind of rushing back, and there's an economic driver to get students in. But actually, wouldn't it be nice if we could maybe just put the brake on for a bit and think, actually, can we have some time just to think about what we're doing? And maybe in this next academic session, let's think a bit more about these kind of digital literacy skills that we need our staff and our students to have, because it could be that we might have these bubbles going isolating, and we're going to have much more kind of local lockdowns as well. So we can't just assume that we will be going back to normal, because we will be going in and out of lockdown at various levels, I think, for the next wee while. So we need to make sure that what we're doing is robust enough to be able to cope with that as well. So I think that's all that I wanted to say there. And we'll, I think, Keith, we're going to move on to some open questions that people can maybe contribute to as well.
Yeah, we didn't want to be too prescriptive about this. So we've identified a few kind of broad open-ended questions that relate to some of the themes we thought would be useful to explore. So those are up on the screen now. I probably we'll just use these as kind of prompts, because I think we're kind of conscious of time as well. So maybe we can just have these here as prompts, but open up the floor for any colleagues that want to respond to some of what Sheila and myself have just covered, or maybe aspects of some of the kind of framing questions here.
Yeah, I mean, so if anyone wants to take the mic, I mean, we're really quite keen that we get different voices being heard here, but if there's anything that you want to say, and also while someone maybe thinks about getting the mic, we can have a quick look at the chat, because I know the chat's been kind of kicking off as well, which is great. Does anyone want to?
Can I dive in there?
Of course, Lorna. Yeah.
I mean, I absolutely agree with what you said about rather than trying to rush back to whatever normal was, that we do try and take some time to consider what it is we want to go back to. And I think that it is a uniquely difficult position that institutions are in, because they are to some extent constrained by their business models and their charters as to what they can and can't do. And I think sort of juggling those different requirements with economic necessity is really hard. At Edinburgh, the focus has initially been on, when the lockdown initially happened, our focus was very much on continuity, communication and care, and that we really saw that as being key to just keeping the business of education running, while at the same time caring for staff and students. And I think it's going to be important that we don't lose sight of that care. So it's almost like, I think we're already used to the kind of, 8 hours of team meetings a day, and trying to juggle childcare and all the other things that are going with this lockdown, and it has kind of become the new normal. And I think it is important that we don't lose sight of the fact that these are still very, very uncertain times for both staff and students, and that care requirement is not going to go away at all. And particularly as we do move to a hybrid model of delivery, I think we are going to see some anxiety surfacing around workload and different working practices, which are all very legitimate concerns. But I do think it's important that we do centre that care in what we're doing going forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Lorna. Thank you.
I think this was something we were grappling with ourselves when we were thinking about some of these questions, and particularly, I guess, maybe the final question there around that whole kind of social well-being and sense of belonging, particularly as we move to, at first, fully or predominantly online learning, and then more hybrid approaches. We're kind of cognizant of the fact that even very motivated students can find online learning quite isolating, and unless we build in lots of opportunities, not just for interaction and engagement in educational activities, but we felt we also need to structure those opportunities to help our students self-organize in digital spaces for purposes that aren't related to the learning and teaching, but are about broader aspects of their experience.
Yeah, and I think that's quite key. I think the whole notion of the student experience is changing. I think it's quite a critical point for that. So all our kind of expectations and our knowledge of what the student experience has changed quite rapidly, and is going to change. So again, I think this goes back to time and how we need to think about that. So again, maybe thinking about, when we're thinking about inductions, we don't need to have an induction week anymore. Actually, inductions possibly should be much longer and thinner in terms of that kind of, long, thin versus short, fat modules. And we maybe should be taking more time to get and going back to some of the points that Robin was making about confidence in your online toolkit, if you have, really important for staff. It's just as important for students as well. So to give everyone the confidence in and knowledge and just understanding of the systems that you will be using, we could take a bit more time about that. We could maybe do a bit more kind of cross-disciplinary work, maybe do something that actually is more relevant to what's happening around about here. You know, some key digital skills, particularly around things like data literacy. We're all being bombarded with government statistics just now, and if any of you have watched that, it's certainly the UK government stats, the slides that they share. I don't know who's pulling them together, but you know, they're quite tricky to look at sometimes. But maybe we should be having some conversations about what's being shared, the interpretation of data, how that relates to your discipline area, those kind of things. So I think there's maybe a way we could sort of start looking at these things and not just rushing into things. I think, again, rethinking assessment is going to be quite critical to that. At the QAA Enhancement Themes Conference the other week, there was a really good student panel, and it was really interesting hearing the student reps talking about what students had really valued. And one of the things they really valued, and obviously this is quite contextual because of the situation, but they really like not having to do exams and having open book exams. So why can't we have more than that? More of them. You know, I don't see why we can't. So I think there's lots of things that we can be thinking about just now. But going back to Lorna's point about kind of economic models, there is a balance to be had there. But if we don't start having these conversations and dropping these things into the conversation, then we'll lose this chance. So I think it's really incumbent upon all of us to try and raise these issues as well.
Can I ask a question about induction? And I think it's something that's going to be, it's very important to get this right. And I'm interested to find out what different institutions are doing with regards to reaching out to their new students. I strongly feel that we should be very proactive and letting them know of what they can expect. And I don't think they're currently getting that information, certainly not from what I've seen from my institution. I'd just like to know what other people are doing and their thoughts on that.
Point, Suzanne. Obviously I can't answer because I'm not in an institution, but I think maybe the speed of how we get in contact with our students, also how many students have actually accepted their places for university. When you get access to systems as well, we might have to speed that all up, so you're not just waiting till that week in September when you come on campus to get your, you know, your library card and your login ID. So yeah, I think there's a need to be a rethink, but I'm sure there are other people who could answer that.
I'm sure there are students who are sitting here currently thinking, making a decision, am I going to go or not? And I think if we can tell the students what we've prepared, what this will look like to them, then it'll help them to make a more balanced decision. I think the silence could be quite damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And then someone, Louise is just saying, you know, that's a good segue into virtual tours. Yeah, I know quite a lot of institutions do virtual tours and have been doing sort of virtual open days for quite a while. But it's maybe that kind of that bridge, I think what Suzanne's talking about, maybe you've done the virtual tour, you're lucky enough to get the on-campus tour and you're deciding to go. So it's kind of, again, that confidence thing. How do we make sure our students have access to the key institutional systems that they need before they actually start, so they can maybe do some of the kind of the softer, more social things, you know, and we don't have to provide all the spaces for them, but I think Suzanne's right. I think we do need to be reaching out to our students in a slightly different way than we have been before.
I think as well it's about connecting students with the unions and social clubs as well. At the weekend on the radio, a student was talking about the fact that they were going to defer for a year because they weren't going to have that social engagement that they would, you know, if it was campus based. And I think that is a huge aspect for people considering tertiary education, is, you know, how, you know, joining those clubs. You know, it seems the drinking culture is a lot less than when I was a student, but they fill it with lots of other activities.
I think though there's something there as well, going back to the whole equity notion, that a lot of students come to university or to college and they don't drink, they don't want to do that. You know, we have different cultures coming in, so the social life of a student is not just centered around the student union and drinking games. And I know we all know that, but I think sometimes the kind of the wider narrative about that is kind of lost. So I'm not saying that that's the same for everyone, but you know, I think there are different aspects of kind of socialization and that kind of sense of belonging that again could be started much earlier in terms of when you accept your university place. And I know the Students' Association and clubs and societies are and have been even more active online than they have been, you know, than previously. And I know there's lots of discussions about doing that. So yes, I think that there's something that we need to think about there. And again, it's involving, I think we need to work with our students to understand that and really find out what is the most effective contextual practice for your institution and for your student cohorts.
Yeah, I think this issue of, sorry, carry on.
Sorry. Oh, thanks, Laura. Just be really brief. Lorna, I think another aspect to this we really need to consider, and I've observing it across a number of universities, and we're having discussions internally as well, is what do we do immediately post-enrollment when our students are with us? And I think low stakes socialization activities where learners can get to meet one another, get to know their tutors, find the way around the spaces they'll be using before any formal learning activity gets underway, I think is absolutely critical. I don't know if universities are looking at no formal learning and teaching activities online in week 1, and it's all about induction and orientation and socialization. I think that's absolutely critical as well. Sorry, Lorna, back to you.
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely agree with that. And just to pick up on some of that discussion about the social aspects of learning and of the university experience as well, I think that's why this business of building some kind of collegiality and community is going to be absolutely critical. And I guess one of the good things is that there is practice out there. So I know certainly at Edinburgh we've been running quite a large number of fully online masters, particularly in the medical school and the vet school for quite a long time. And certainly one of the things that comes back from those students is how much they appreciate being able to build a community online. And again, I think, you know, we'll all have read the hot takes about whether learning technology does or doesn't work that are coming out in this sort of tech media at the moment. And I think it is important to communicate that learning online is a different experience, and the skills that you learn will be slightly different, and the way you build community will be slightly different. But different doesn't mean qualitatively worse. You know, there's a whole range of different skills, I think, that are going to be really invaluable for students. And I think it's very interesting to go back to the conversation we were having earlier on about what's happening in the school sector. It's been really interesting seeing school kids being basically just pitched head first into the type of learning they will be expected to do at university. Without any timetable, they're just given pieces of work and expected to get on with it. And I think these kids, when they start coming through, they're going to come through with a very different skill set. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves. But certainly, I absolutely agree that in the short term, putting all the tools and support in place to build that important collegiality and that feeling of community amongst the students and amongst the staff as well is going to be critical.
Just check with Vicky as to how we're doing for time.
Yeah, I think we've got 1 minute left if anybody wants to make an additional contribution before we move on to tools and technologies.
And I think that's quite a nice neat into tools and technologies anyway. Nice link at that point anyway to move on to that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think just, you know, what Lorna was saying about postgrad programs there, and it just made me think back to points that were raised earlier about provision for staff. I think coming out of this, there's a real need to look at our programs of education for staff. So our TQFEs, our PG certs, our Masters of Education programs. There's some really good ones out there, but I think pre-COVID, I think it was a big question mark over the extent to which they effectively role modeled good digital practice. I think post-COVID, some of those programs are now looking very orthodox and very stale, and maybe not as fit for purpose as they should be in terms of preparing our staff going forward.
Absolutely.
Just say here to that, absolutely, Keith.
Okay, fantastic. So that was really thought-provoking and just slowed us down just to think about some of the critical questions. So as usual, if you'd just like to use your reaction button just to show your appreciation for another great session. Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, Keith, and thanks everyone who contributed to that as well. So next we're over to Suzanne and Louise, who are going to be sharing some great new tools and technologies with us and their experience of other tools and technologies. So over to you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, hi. Can you see me okay? And I'm just going to share my screen with you. Hopefully you can see my slides there as well. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay.
Yes, all good. It's all coming through beautifully.
Okay. Excellent. For those of you who, most of you know me, I'm Louise Jones, and I'm delighted to be presenting and facilitating this discussion with Suzanne as well. Suzanne, did you want to say hello?
Hello. Louise, do you want to put your presentation onto presentation mode? Is that?
Yeah, I'll do that right now. Excellent. Okay, so basically, we've put together a few slides for you. I'm now working for a company called ThingLink, and my role is Director of Education, Community and Partnerships globally. And as you know, my background is education in Scotland, so I thought it'd be really helpful for me to pick out some of the things that I'm seeing globally and how countries have responded to COVID and some of the technologies that they're using, but teasing out what some of those important points are. And Suzanne's put together a Padlet as well, and you'll be able to go to that short link, bit.ly/AltScotland, and we're going to return to that at the end, and we'll have a look at some of your suggestions, the things that have worked well for you and your institution throughout COVID. So yeah, it's just been so lovely to listen to Lorna and Keith. I'm sat there going, absolutely, absolutely, to everything they were saying there, particularly around this notion of socially rich and engaging digital learning and teaching, and also this notion that, you know, it's not just good enough to have an induction, that you need to have this full experience. So what I particularly have seen is that schools and campuses are saying we're always open virtually. And that isn't just about new students who might be interested in going to that campus. It's for existing students who have actually been away from the campus, where that decision to actually just shut the doors, and I'm saying shut the doors rather than schools being closed, because I don't think schools are closed. Learning is continuing, learning has continued throughout the time, and I think that's doing teachers and lecturers a disservice by saying, you know, everything's been closed. But it's been really important to keep existing students in touch with the places and spaces that they know and love, but also invite students and parents to tour around the university or the establishment. But instead of just doing a kind of virtual tour with 360, they're putting in, you know, additional media. This is what I mean by being very media rich and multimedia rich. So that might be that social presence of the teacher. And I've got a lovely example here, which is Pennybont Primary School in Wales. And they've done a 360 of the school. And when you click into the classrooms, there's video messages from the teachers, and they're actually saying, hi, I miss you, can't wait to see you. So this has been critical for parents and carers to support their children who maybe struggled with the kind of notion that they weren't in school and that school and learning was different. And I just think that, as Keith mentioned, that social presence, being visually engaging, has been something that we've seen certainly pop up across the globe in terms of digital learning and teaching. And then some of you have probably seen these being shared across Twitter, the Bitmoji classrooms. And initially, if you think when the doors were, you know, kind of the doors were closed, but learning continued, there was a rush and a panic to kind of get lots of materials out to parents and put things on YouTube, and parents were like, hang on a second, this is just way too confusing, this is overwhelming, particularly when you've got parents who are maybe working from home as well, and maybe have children with different types of approaches. So we saw these Bitmoji classrooms popping up, particularly in Scotland, but I saw quite a lot of these in the States as well. And I've tried not to be too proprietary in this deck, but people were saying how they were creating these and using them within Microsoft Teams or putting them within a Google Classroom. But also they were organising the learning, and quite often some of the examples I saw were that you would have different parts of the classroom and different colours for differentiation. And these were all about understanding the weekly tasks and resources. And this example that I've put on this slide, if you actually go onto it and the slides are shared in the Padlet, you can click on the icons, and this teacher actually got her dog with a My Talking Pets app saying, primary ones, you're all brilliant. And I just love this, and the parents' feedback was just fantastic, saying it was really easy to understand the weekly tasks and resources, and of course you didn't need to complete all of the tasks. These were choice boards, so we've seen a lot of these springing up. Now, this next one I put up because this is something else that I think I've seen featuring quite heavily, is that we're seeing a lot of video type resources popping up, and what people are saying now is that how would you tell the difference between a published research peer evaluated piece of work and then someone just putting up a thought piece? And we've got to apply that same thinking to online learning materials, just as we do with like text with videos. So we really need to see videos containing references, links and sources to materials, either in the notes pages. I've just obviously put some hotspots up there because this is the work that I'm involved in. But soon we will really need to start appraising or having some kind of system for being really careful about the kinds of YouTube videos that we're seeing out there. And parents were also saying, you know, YouTube's great, but actually it's a real headache for the establishment when every teacher wants a YouTube account. And parents were saying that actually it wasn't a great tool, because if someone was on a YouTube clip, it sent them down this kind of YouTube rabbit warren, and people were getting completely kind of sidetracked and looking at other things, and remembering that obviously there's an algorithm with YouTube which is going to come up with videos that might be suggested for you, and they're not just based on what you're viewing there and then, they might be based on other algorithms as well. So it's really important not to forget that. And then of course with our impetus and thinking around open education resources, we now need to think about other types of virtual access resources. So for example, in Vancouver, no it wasn't, it was Vermont, they were creating links of all of the museums across the whole state to share those out to the pupils. And they didn't need a lot of technology to do that. They were just using the Google Street View app, and they were recording the 360s, and then they were able to knit those together. So I think it's really important that when we think about OER, we're also thinking about OER in terms of the virtual access to the physical spaces as well. Kenji made this point, absolutely, we've got to think about accessibility with online learning materials, and I've seen a huge uptick in the use of things like Immersive Reader. So Immersive Reader is Microsoft's accessibility tool, where you can translate this into 80 different languages. You can change the viewing and the focus. So I think that whilst, yes, it is overwhelming to think about the new accessibility requirements and regulations that are coming in, the industry is responding by making sure that things like Immersive Reader can be embedded into any Microsoft partner tools. Likewise, there's another tool, Read and Write, but also devices having text-to-speech, speech-to-text. So I think that, yeah, we need to be mindful of these as well.
Louise, if you don't mind me saying, is a PowerPoint Live as well. That can come up with automatic transcription, and also can be translated into, I think it's over 80 different languages as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this is just another nice example of the University of Helsinki with their art education. They enlisted the support of other museums to make sure that they could incorporate that into K-12 education as well. And then, of course, there's adaptive learning in virtual contexts. So looking at the use of, say, for example, whether it's Google Form or a Microsoft Form or some kind of data collection in context. So we've seen a huge uptick, again, in kind of visual learning materials where you're trying to get in context data collection, and that might be through chatbots or AI. And as you saw the example last year from Bolton College, which was Ask Ada, which we had some fascinating conversations about, you'll see more of these coming into the virtual context as well. And as well as that, then the in-house data collection as well, where people are trying to make sure that they can gain real-time feedback from students as well. And then my last point, I have one more, let me just go back, here we go, was the use of 360 videos. So I've certainly seen people using 360 videos, particularly around Skills 4.0 in the manufacturing industry. Joe and Kenji and I have had at the other NMIS meetings where we've been able to look at what the potential is for immersive learning experiences, whether it's on, say, for example, a building site where you've got a 360 at the top of the crane and you're learning what it's like to work at height. So I'm certainly seeing a lot of these new tools that are coming in as well. So just a few summary points there, and it's really a kind of thought piece and some of the things that I've been seeing. And I know that Suzanne's going to come in now with some of the things that she's been seeing, but we want to hear what you've been seeing, not just in Scotland, not in your own institutions, but we're all on social media, we're all getting a feel for what's out there. And the silver lining is that that socially rich and visually rich media is lending itself well to the things that Keith and Lorna were saying, which was about increasing and enhancing the student experience, but also being more socially rich and helping communities to be built, because they are so much more personal, and teachers are putting a personal spin on things, and they're realizing that those small personal touches will make the world of difference in engaging learners who might be quite distant from their school and their peers at that same time. So I'm just going to stop there, and I'm going to put on the Padlet that we've got there. So hopefully you can see the Padlet, or I might need to share my screen again. Can you see the Padlet okay? Is that showing?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, I might need to stop and share my screen again because I've changed the tab. Excellent.
We just wanted to give you all an opportunity to think about what sort of tools you've been using in your setting, whether that's in schools, further education, higher education, what's worked and what hasn't. I think there's a danger, certainly even in any setting, whether that's been within schools, further education or higher education, you've got little pockets of people using tools and using them very well, and other people in the institution not knowing what's going on. I think we have to make a concerted effort to try and come together and try and capture the tools that are being used and what they're being used for, and making sure that information is shared with each other. So this is an opportunity to open it up to you all to have a think about, okay, sharing on this platform, what tools, what platforms you've been using that have worked particularly well, but also importantly, what's not been working well, to save others time going down, perhaps making using something that does not work well for you. So you can see here we've got Moodle, we've got things like everyone's very familiar with in using Zoom. One of the particular challenges that we're facing, that we're trying to overcome just now, is we've got a number of courses where there's a lot of practical hands-on skills are involved, and we're trying to think just now about how we overcome that. And I'm assuming that's a problem faced by people in other settings as well. I'd be interested to find out how you're planning to overcome those difficulties. So the plan is to open it up and try and get some feedback from you all.
Suzanne, it's Sheila here. Just one thing I've kind of noticed. I think what we need to also kind of try and keep is, in the kind of like the immediate crisis, if you like, there was a great willingness from staff to do things that maybe they hadn't done before, and use some of the tools that maybe they hadn't used as much as they possibly could have before. So I think keeping that kind of momentum up is quite important as well. And I think there's a balance between finding a tool set that you can use and you can be confident with, and actually being overwhelmed with as well. So I think there's quite a balancing act in terms of the tools that people are going to use, because I think one thing that, again, going back to this confidence point, sometimes that there's so many things out there to do that sometimes you get that kind of, actually there's so much, I just don't really know what tool to use. So I just wanted to put that in as well.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. I think you can go down that hole, can't you, of exploring lots and lots of different tools and actually ending up not using any of them because you spend all of your time trying to find out what could work and in what setting you could use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where we're kind of like that staff development, and particularly that kind of learning design, thinking about what it is you want to do, as opposed to, oh, Suzanne's using whatever, can I use that? And actually think, what is it? Finding out what Suzanne's actually doing in it and thinking, well, oh yeah, I can see how that can work for me. So again, it's that kind of, I think if we go back to design and, you know, having the pedagogy driving the technology as much as we can, but that's, again, you do need time to have these conversations with people just now as well.
Yeah.
If I may, one of our main concerns in school model languages at the University of Glasgow has been to think from the student's point of view that if so student is learning supposedly 2 languages plus another subject, if I use 3 or 4 different resources that I prefer work well with me, and then my colleague in another language uses one of those plus 3 other different ones, and the other subject uses another 4 different ones, it's fine for us because it works well. I know 3 or 4, I'm quite comfortable with that, but the poor student is bombarded with potentially 10 different methods of teaching online and learning how to use. One is a Loom, the other one is a Zoom, the other one is more Microsoft based, etc., etc. So trying to find ways of actually asserting from the student's perspective what would be better. And one of the things that has dawned on me is the fantastic work that has been done from schools, and maybe we don't need to, at least for my school, for the university, we might not have to be needing to think too much outside the box of what can I use, what kind of fantastic new resources out there to make it work, and just use what the students have been using. I'm focusing particularly on first-year students in the university, what they've been using throughout their school life with the Glow and other systems that they've been using, majority of them, and see what has worked with them, and then try and bring that to the university. So it's one thing less that we have to do is teach students how to use a whole new set of resources that a particular university or particular department or subject prefers to use for their case. Of course, there are particular cases that are subject specific in medicine or etc. But that aside, I'm sure there are quite a few common things, and as brilliant as everything is out there, nothing is perfect. Might be maybe easier to look from the student perspective and see maybe they are comfortable with Moodle and not Blackboard, so we just could focus more on Moodle. They don't like Zoom, they prefer Teams. Maybe you just use Teams. I don't know, something like that. I wonder what other people are thinking about it.
I think it is really important to gather information from the students. They've had this period of time where they have been learning online, and that's valuable experience that they've got. We need to find out from them absolutely what worked and what didn't. And I 100% agree with you with regards to having an approach across the faculty, or even rather than, as you say, individual lecturers, teachers using tools that they like to use. There needs to be a coordinated approach to make sure that students, learners aren't overloaded, having to try and learn lots and lots of different tools and systems. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
And I think some of this goes back to the way as learning technologists that we're able to support technologies with our lecturers and teachers, because what you don't want is people going off and creating secret IT services because they've been told no, they can't use something, and they go and use personal email accounts to engage with students on their personal accounts. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be saying to people, you know, don't do this, but if there's a real danger if we only stick with a small defined set of tools, that people will go off and do that. So it is better to have a larger toolbox where teachers will find the tools that are supported by the university or the establishment. And from my own personal experience of when I listen to purely with students and what they're comfortable with, we're never challenging them and we're never pushing them to try and develop new digital skills and be engaged in new different types of media. And it kind of goes back to that saying around, if you wanted a faster horse, if you wanted a, I can't remember the saying, you know the one I mean. If people had designed wanted something faster, they would have got a faster horse rather than a motor car. But yeah, so I think, you know, we have a responsibility as leaders to always be thinking about providing people with the right set of tools and the right support, and being focused on the future as well.
Can I just jump in there with one of the things that we're seeing in Edinburgh that's quite interesting is we're starting to see a bit of a blurring in terms of the boundaries of how different tools are used, particularly around virtual classroom tools. So for example, at Edinburgh, we've got a very clear policy about lecture recording that's related to the capture of, or the recording of, lecturers standing up in lecture rooms and being filmed. And we had very, very clear policy about consent to be filmed and how long recordings can be collected and all that kind of stuff. And the development of that policy was a really in-depth process. Everyone was involved, the unions were involved. But now that we're moving to this more hybrid model, and we're colleagues are making a lot more use of the virtual classroom of Collaborate, we also have several media recording tools that can be used for colleagues to just develop record short videos online, which we're encouraging them to do. And what we're finding is people are starting to ask questions about, well, if I record a 10-minute video for my students, is that covered by the lecture recording policy? And I think that we're starting to see a sort of butting up of and a blurring of these boundaries of how these tools are used, what they're used for, what constitutes a lecture, what constitutes a seminar, and how is that reflected in policy. And I think it's going to be quite difficult to unpick all this, because there are all sorts of concerns related to privacy, data, copyright permissions, all that kind of stuff. And how we handle that in this new environment is going to be really quite interesting going forward, I think.
Okay, so Vicky, I think I'm right in saying we're coming to the end of our allocated slot, is that right?
I think so, just a minute or two left, and then what we'll do is we'll basically have a break where people can grab food, and we'll come back at 12:15 for the breakout rooms. But it's great to see some really wonderful things being posted on the Padlet. So yeah, if you need another minute, feel free to just close that session. That's great.
I think I just encourage people to keep sharing on the Padlet. I think that can be a very useful resource for us to see what's going on in different sectors, see what tools are being used and in what way. And just thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all today. It's been great.
Thank you. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure to chat to you all and gather some of my own thoughts about what's happening globally. Someone's just asked if we could put the link to the Padlet up again. Yeah, it is, I think we put it right at the start. It's bit.ly/alt-Scotland. So you'll be able to go straight onto that, and that will take you to the Padlet. And we've also put the slides there. So a big thank you to me as well, from me as well. Thank you.
I've just put the Padlet link. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Louise and Suzanne. That was great. And thanks for everybody who contributed. Again, big clap for everybody. So what I suggest is we just take a wee break, stop your video, mute your audio, and we'll come back at 12:15, and we're going to put you into breakout rooms. We're going to be looking at what other help the alt community can provide for you. So stay tuned, and we'll see you shortly.
See you later, folks. Right. Was you there? You downstairs?
everyone. It looks as if people are slowly drifting back. Hopefully you've been able to grab some food, and of course you can continue with lunch in our breakout rooms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 4 breakout rooms, because I think that will allow 9 to 10 people per room, and I think that'll create just a really nice kind of intimate atmosphere for discussions. I'm going to do it automatically, and so Lee and Tony, you've offered to help facilitate discussions. If you by any chance end up in the same room, I'll try and sort that out, so that one of us can be in each room, and we'll get that started shortly. Good to see you, Idris.
Hi, Vicky.
It must be late for you.
Oh, no issues. It was just the right time, so I was having dinner instead of lunch.
Okay. Oh, well, it's not so bad. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think people are pretty much back. Some people have still got their cameras off. Maybe just give them a wee minute. Everybody's getting Zoom fatigue as well, so it can be quite full on to sort of be on screen the whole time, I think. Quite good sometimes just to take a wee break and switch the camera off.
My cat has decided to join us.
Fantastic. The more cats, the better, in my opinion.
I agree.
Good to see you, Tony. Okay, so I'm going to start the breakout rooms. Like I say, I'm going to try for random organisation. If I can do it actually manually, I will try it. But just give me a wee minute just to sort that out. Okay, it's taken a little bit of time just to assign everybody manually. I will do this very quickly. No, I'm going to do it automatically. It's quicker. Reflection and action there. Okay, all right, you go into your breakout rooms very quickly. See you soon.
Right. Right.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Lorna. Hi, Wasim. Wakar, good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. How are you guys?
Good. How are you? How are you holding up?
Not bad. Not bad. Just a bit busy at some
Yeah.
of the meetings. Just joined a bit late your sessions. I missed the first part of the session.
Oh, don't worry. We've recorded it, so you can catch up
Okay.
with it any time.
That would be
And we'll
great.
put the slides and things available online too.
Excellent. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to broadcast a link to everybody so that everybody in the breakout rooms have got the bit.ly link. But basically what we're talking about is how the alt community can help you. So we've heard quite a lot today about, we've heard what's happening in schools, we've heard what's happening in further education, the fact that there are loads of lovely emerging new technologies happening, but we're balancing that against things like GDPR, making sure we have a consistent set of tools. Keith and Sheila's session was really nice and gave us an opportunity just to stop and reflect really, and think, you know, what is the new normal? What aspects of the old normal can we do without in terms of moving forward? So it's really just to have a chat about that really. And I think some people are obviously just turned their cameras off. If you're here, feel free to put your camera on or unmute your mic. It could just be myself and yourself, Wasim. So I'm just going to broadcast a message to all just now.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, I'll maybe just pop into the other breakout rooms just to see what's happening. We seem to have a very small group of people.
Which group can I join?
Wasim, you're not assigned. That's it. Let me assign you to breakout room 2.
Thank you.
That should be you. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, brilliant. Okay, so it looks as if we've got people coming back into the room. Hopefully we'll have the others joining us shortly. I'm going to have a go at sharing my screen and bring up the Padlet and see if we've got any ideas on there. So just bear with me a wee second. Fantastic, we've got loads of suggestions. So Martin, I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look at any of these, because I know you've been involved in the breakout discussions too. I'd just maybe take a wee minute and see if there's anything that jumps out at us while we're waiting for everybody to come back. And I think everybody should be back more or less now. So I heard Kenji talk at one point about having a curated set of resources. I don't know if that's his suggestion. We know there's great papers in the alt repository. Can we have a curated set of papers that address the current challenges? That sounds good.
There's actually the QA Scotland have the hub. So they've got a focus on TelHub. And that has a number of different resources. I'll maybe just grab the link quickly. And as part of that, I'm in the process of putting together some alt resources. But let me see if I can get the link.
I think that's a good idea, Kenji, but I think that might be quite context related as well, depending on where you are, what things are most relevant to you. But you know, if people wanted to make some, you know, FE or schools or HE things, or even discipline areas or practical things, like there's a lot of things that we said earlier about lab work. You know, people are really looking for time to do that. There's maybe opportunities to do that. But when you say something like that, Kenji, that means you volunteer yourself to do it.
Well done, Kenji.
But I think I was sticking up the things. I wonder also if, you know, I don't know what the repository's got at the back end, but even if, Martin, there's you know, what are the top 10 resources that have been searched for or something? So crudely we could maybe use audience response a bit maybe as well.
That's a good idea, Joe. Does anybody want to share what came out of their discussions, and perhaps Martin and others could respond? Does that sound like a plan? Yeah. Yep. Okay, so I can't remember who was in what group, I'm afraid, so please just feel free to share what was in your group.
Well, I'll start if you want. I think we were mainly all from HE in my group, but we were talking about engagement and that kind of balance between synchronous and asynchronous sessions, and whether or not, you know, how to get students to turn their cameras on and do things. So there was lots of discussions about some of the more simple things you can do, and that go through all the sectors, you know, like some of the things that Kirsty was talking about, you know, like quizzes and forums. Suzanne mentioned Kahoot. And also I think what we're talking about quite a lot is engaging our students and actually asking them what's working for them. Why is it working? Why is it not? And, you know, kind of maybe we need to be thinking a bit more about actually getting more used to asking students at the end of a live online session, well, how did it go today? What happened? And those kind of issues. I realised, I just put it in the main chat, there was a really good post this morning from Mahabali about online engagement in webinars, Zooms, whatever. So that's there. So I think that was kind of mainly what we talked about. I don't know if anyone that was in my group, Suzanne, I can just see you might think if there's anything else there that you think we should share with the rest of the group.
I think that's a really good summary. While Suzanne's just maybe thinking about that, it's a good time to maybe signpost the Alt Scotland group, the Alt ELISIG group rather. So ELISIG used to stand for E-Learning Evaluation Special Interest Group. It's now the Learner Experience Research Special Interest Group, and it falls within the Alt umbrella as of last year. And that's a good opportunity to share the outcomes of scholarship work anybody's doing around learner experience research. So I think you're absolutely right, Sheila. I think evaluation of student experience is absolutely critical, and we might just do that informally as part of our QA practices and to inform our learning and teaching. But then obviously also it's an opportunity, you know, for scholarship too.
Yeah, just to echo what Sheila was saying, getting feedback after each session rather than midway and at the end of a module like perhaps we usually did, but it's really important to get that feedback regularly to find out what works and what doesn't, and also to inquire from your students so that you get a better understanding what circumstances they're working under. They could be in a family where there's one laptop for 4 people who are all trying to work online, they might not have a quiet space to be able to work. So I think we have to be more proactive in trying to find out what sort of environment our students are working in to be able to support them to make sure they can get the most out of their learning online experience.
Definitely, Suzanne. And I think the JISC Insights survey is just about to publish its most recent findings, or share the most recent findings if they haven't already done that. And there's 20,000 learners just in HE alone completed that survey. But of course, that doesn't give us the complete insight, like you say, into what's going on in people's lives and their circumstances. Perhaps we could hear from another group.
Will I have a go?
Yeah.
There was probably 3 things, maybe 4 things we went round. You've heard the last one, which was the asking all to see if we can get a top 10 or recommended reading lists and things that we can push back round the system. And it's really so that when and again, we're not being, well, this bit is being recorded, but sometimes senior managers don't always know what they're talking about, and it's just useful to have some evidence that we can push under their noses before they suddenly buy a system that nobody's heard of, or any of these kind of interesting challenges that I think we're all regularly faced with. So that would be good. At a very practical level, we think there's learning that needs to come out around, and I'll use the word MiFi and dongles. And I know there's geographical differences all across Scotland, so different solutions will work in different places, but we all can see that that's a big challenge that nobody's really come back and asked us to solve yet, but we can see that it needs solved, that we may have between 1 and maybe even 10% of learners at City of Glasgow College who haven't got Wi-Fi, or it's told, or there's other barriers that prevent them from engaging with blended learning. Another question, and it's maybe not all, it's maybe broader than that, it's about guidelines and best practice, and I'll use the word timetabling, which is not the right word, but it's that bit of, if we all rush back to the kind of normal, and we've got 30% of our students back in, that's 100% of the teaching time. So how do we balance this out, and again convince timetablers and things that if you're bringing students in, they might not be coming in for, in inverted commas, a full timetable, because the teaching member of staff's got to also have things for the other 2/3 of students that won't be in the building.
Jo, can I also add to that as well, that there will be people who also have a child at home that they have to look after and homeschool as well. We found out, well, I've been confirmed my little boy is going back on a Monday, Tuesday, as of the 11th of August. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'll be looking after him with regards to his learning as well. So I really feel there needs to be a more full appreciation, not only of the students' situations, but staff as well. Yeah, no,
absolutely. And again, I don't know if that's particularly an alt role, but I think it's something where we could maybe share good practice or share practice there. And there was a third one, and of course, everybody's all put their great ideas up, and I can't see it, so I'll go back to my group. Is that a fair reflection? I think there was one other thing that we chatted about.
That sounds like quite a lot, Jo. It's quite a lot of stuff in there to think about. That's great. Does anybody else want to share what happened in their group?
I think I can give an update on what we were talking about. It was kind of related to what Jo just mentioned, because we did talk a bit about well-being, and Keith had mentioned that they use mentoring at UHI and had suggested that might be a role that ALT could play, which I would really welcome, because I really miss the informal opportunities for communication and collaboration that you get in a face-to-face environment that I don't think we've quite replicated. And then we went off on a tangent about, not quite a tangent, but sidestepped into, the notion that where we haven't really dealt with this in our own way of working, we're now asking students to come into this environment, and we need to recognise the importance of their peer-to-peer support and peer-to-peer communication. And again, a lot of it in the face-to-face environment happens in a very unstructured way, in a very informal way. And it's actually quite hard to unpick that and put the scaffolding in place so that students feel that level of support. I'm sure we talked about lots of other things. I don't know if Martin or Heath want to come in.
I was just typing there just to say that a colleague of ours in our Learning and Teaching Academy, Alex Walker, came up with a really great format for online mentoring circles, which were the things I alluded to earlier. And if we wanted to explore some sort of semi-formal mentoring arrangements between alt members going forward, we'd be really happy to share that and for it to be repurposed if it would be of any use. So a kind of protocol and all kinds of things being developed. It's light touch, but it works really well.
Just one more thing from our group before you finish, because it was a very practical tip from Jason, was that they've changed their protocols for meetings so that their meetings all start now at 5 past the hour and finish at 5 to the hour. It's a very small thing, but it's giving you that sort of 10 minutes of breathing space when sometimes you do have back-to-back meetings. So small tip, but might make a difference for some people.
I think that's a really good tip, Lee, and I think we should take that into account. So I would suggest that we close in a few minutes. So we've got maybe 3 minutes to go, but I just wondered if anybody else wanted to say something from another group before we bring things to a proper close.
If there's no one else, I'm going to jump in and just thank, I think Vicky, Joe, well, Vicky have both done a wonderful job in getting us together today, and I think it's been fairly eye-opening and refreshing, and also a joy to reconnect with familiar faces, but also see a number of new faces as well. So I think if we could give a round of applause to Joe and Vicky and the organising team, I think it's well deserved. And also thank you for your feedback. I think there are a number of ideas here, and Keith, I think looking at the mentoring side as well, I think it sounded like that was something very practical that we could do to support our members, particularly under these pressure times. I think having mentoring is actually a very beneficial way of helping with health and well-being, as well as the practicalities of what to do and things to look at and so on.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks to all the organising committee, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. I think you're all doing such an amazing job. I'd just like to finally hand over to Sheila, because obviously, Sheila, it's coming to the close of your role as chair, and I think it would be appropriate for you to close the meeting. And we'd just like to thank you, and I would suggest that everybody unmutes their mic and gives Sheila a big round of applause as well for her leadership. So we could do that just now.
So, I'm blushing now. No emoji. Well, thank you very much. I suppose just to echo what Martin said there, I think today's been really, really useful. And I think over the last couple of months in particular, Alt has always provided community space, which is always needed, but I think it's been needed even more so in the last few months. And it's so great to see so many people. I think at one point, there were 60 people here, which is fantastic that people can still find the time to connect. And I think I always find with alt meetings, they reinvigorate me. So thank you all for your contributions. And like Martin said, I think there's some really good ideas to move forward. I will obviously still be around. I'm still just going to be active as part of the committee for Alt Scotland anyway. But just thank you all. And yes, just to say that, I know the elections are finished for next year, but Scotland has always had quite a good presence on the Alt board, and I know we've still got Keith and Lorna there, but those of you who've come to Alt meetings or are involved, just think about progression. I never ever thought that I would rise to the giddy heights of being chair. I can do it, anyone can. But thank you all, it's been great, and have a great rest of the day. And also just want to reiterate what I said earlier on, you're all doing an amazing job, so thank you all for what you're doing, and carry on, because it's you guys that make the difference and make change really happen, and make the learning experience for our students, the great experience that it is for the vast majority of our students. So thank you all very much for that, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of the day.
Well done, thank you. And probably one final word for me. You know, as we all go into this summer period, we're all going to be really busy and trying to stay sane as teaching members of staff depart, and then they start panicking probably in about 3 weeks' time or less about what's going to happen on the return. Remember, we've got the Alt Scotland Jiskmail group and things. Do not feel alone. Reach out to each other, and we're all here to help each other. Okay. I know there's lots of other good groups, but all let's use each other. Okay, and stay safe over the summer, folks.
Okay, bye everyone. Take care.
Bye for now. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye.